Hi, this is Rob Sheen with the Source Conference, and I'm here with Katy Anton, who is a Principal Application Security Consultant at Veracode, and she's going to be speaking at Source Boston next week on May 1st through 3rd, and her talk is on injecting proactive security controls in software development. So I actually teach software developers a lot of this stuff, so this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. So why don't you just start by just tell us a little bit about what your talk is about?
So my talk is about injecting security controls in software development, but injecting it in a manner that helps creating secure software from the start. Rather than trying to bolt in security at the end, which doesn't work, then these would be things that developers can use to incorporate the security into their software applications. One of the things that I've noticed is in many companies, the security and the application security in particular is in place as a result of compliance regulations. They've implement application security in order to comply with various regulations. And then this is how it is checked for and doesn't quite work. One of the common things is that developers will focus only on that particular vulnerability, and this will be their entire focus. So my talk is about trying to understand what these vulnerabilities are, how they decompose into the security controls that prevent them, and how developers can use these security controls into their software development.
Got it. Now, you mentioned in your abstract this idea that SQL injection is pretty much the king of software vulnerabilities, and that, after 20 years of doing it, we're still fighting that one. And I actually, interestingly enough, I make that exact same point whenever I teach this stuff. Like, hey guys, we haven't even solved the top one yet, let alone the top 10. So why is it that we're still fighting that one? And how do we kind of make some progress there?
So if we look at the injection as a category, this is a large category. It contains multiple types of injections. And in OWASP Top 10 2017, when they talk about the injection, they actually talk about all types of injections. Mm-hmm. And each of these injections have its own defensive mechanisms. You have one way to defend against cross-site scripting, which is one type of injection on the output. Another one on to defend against SQL injection, which is the injection which changes the meaning of the SQL query. Another and different one to parameterize. So that's what I've tried to put together to identify what should you focus on, and in particular what developers should focus on, and what are the primary controls, and then the defense in-depth controls for this large category.
Got it. Oh, do you want to say something else?
No, that's all.
Okay, I thought I was cutting you off. So, we talk about, with things like SQL injection specifically, you can do prepared statements to store procedures. You can actually validate the inputs. There's a lot of things you can do there. I found that often it's a struggle just to get people to do it. Like, how do we actually shift the mindset so they're actually going to do it? Because it's kind of a solved problem in a lot of ways. Like if you know how to fix it, like security professionals know how to fix it. So how do we get the development teams to actually implement those things?
Yeah, so one of the things, my background comes from software development, and I think this is one of my strengths in a way, because I have been in software development as developers, and I started managing teams of developers, and then I moved in the application security. So I have this all around experience, hand-on experience in managing things. And from my experience, and when I have implemented application security in my previous role, it works if we focus from attacker's point of view, which is what we have done by now. This is how you break it. Mm-hmm. Developers, it's something that you pick on their code and they'll try argue. What I'm trying to do, and works very well from my experience as application security consultant as well in my consultations with developers, is focusing on their code and using terminology that is specific to developers and they are familiar with. One of the things that I ask, for example, can you actually test this piece of code? Can you add unit test on this piece of code? And for example, that's a very quite easily, because they recognize that that's not quite well written, they'll say no because it's a legacy or something else, or oh, we can change it in this way. So I try to focus on their needs, their mindset, and using terms that they are familiar with, but has a positive consequence on the overall application security of the software.
Got it. Yeah, it's a hard problem for sure, because developers are fundamentally focused on,
Yes.
I need to get the functionality done. And
yes, and that was my challenge when I actually started to implement security in my previous company, because we had every 2 weeks releases, or every week, depending of what we needed to release when. So it was a fast-paced release a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I could not ask my developers, no, you have to think about SQL injection or command injection. That would not work for a developer. That was, his mind is focused on how to write the code to deliver the functionality that at the end he's measured on. So that's why I've looked into how can we reverse into. And this is when I actually joined the OWASP Top 10 Proactive Security Controls project. And started working with Domenico and Jim Bird alongside to try to come up with security controls to reverse that are reversible to the OWASP of 10 2017, for example, but that will work for developers.
Right. Yeah, because you got to get them in the mindset of like, how do you not only build it so it works, but build it so it works securely, and so not also working for the attackers to get in. And it's a hard problem. I mean, we've been definitely beating the drum for 20 years now, for sure. I have been.
We are.
And it's also every so often we'll get a new influx of brand new developers that haven't gotten the message yet. So then we're kind of back to the drawing board every 3 or 4 years. Is there any way we could get the message out earlier for people so that as new folks come in, they just kind of start doing things, implementing things the right way?
Well, that's what I'm trying. That will be the focus as part of my talk, rather than focusing on these vulnerabilities, to focus on the security controls that are familiar to developers. And this is what I'm going to discuss as part of the talk. And then as well to use them when it makes sense for developers, but all in the software development cycle, but also from an AppSec point of view, to find that balance.
Right. Yeah, I definitely am a big fan of trying to get people to do security earlier as well.
Yes.
Oftentimes we're doing it very reactively, and oh my God, we found an issue, we got to fix it now. Versus I'd rather see people like early on in the early stages actually think through it, architecture and design levels. How do we approach some of these things? Are there any ways you can think of that would kind of push the problem closer to the beginning of the project, where they might be able to address it more cost effectively and more maybe overall effectively?
Yes, so would be ideally I have implemented the security in all the stages of the software development cycle, and that will start from the design. And there are things that so for example, a good example is a software developer is very familiar with software design patterns. That's something that they've learned. They've learned a lot at universities, but they are not aware of how a software design pattern can actually influence the attack surface when they bring in a new library. And that's an example that they can start before they think they work on incorporating a new library, to think of what would be the best design pattern that will help to reduce the attack surface when bringing this one into the software. And also is easy for them to maintain these or even replace them without much penalty. How they can do this one in a manner that it allows them to quickly upgrade them in case that they have become obsolete. So that's one thing that they can do. So it can start with various concepts from the design of the software and then move on at the coding stage. And unit testing as well is something that and testing, functional testing. For example, a good example that I use in my consultation is the unit testing. So you have a bit of software, and if it is correct written, then you can actually do positive testing of what it's supposed to do and negative testing to actually throw exceptions when things are not working as expected. So that's something that can be done by developers because they are familiar with that concept, and also improves the security of the software delivered.
Right. It gets a little tricky sometimes though, because some of the things that you would throw out as a security professional might not be things they even think about or know how to do. You know, like encoding special characters in weird ways or stuff like that. So, I think it probably has to be kind of a two-prong approach, right? You get them to fix
Yes.
it the best they can, but then you still have to throw the security people at it at the end of the day to,
Oh yeah,
you know,
definitely. You still need an application security team with more complex issues,
Mhm.
but large things can be done by developers using certain techniques and thinking of certain things during the development of the software.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that because a lot of the things that come up are just silly things that they clearly could have caught if they had just thought
Yes.
about it.
Yes. From my experience, the large number of issues are not sometimes are complex because of the nature of the software, but that's not the majority. They are the majority are because of they are not aware, and they are silly things that can be resolved.
Right, right. All right, great. Well, we're looking forward to seeing your talk next week at Source. And if people want to continue the conversation, definitely stop on by at the conference. And other than that, I think we will see you there. So talk soon, and thanks for coming on the show.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me.
Great, thanks. Talk soon.
Thanks.